Story 1. I have worked in an inpatient psychiatric unit for many years, and honestly, it is tough to say which condition is the worst. However, some of the most debilitating cases where I truly felt for the patients were often complex post-traumatic stress disorder cases. People usually assume the worst diagnosis is schizophrenia, and while schizophrenia can be incredibly serious, we are often able to stabilize those patients with medication. Many of them go on to live relatively normal lives with the right support. But with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, the emotional pain, the distrust, the lifelong impact of trauma, it just lingers. It affects every part of a person's identity and relationships. Treatment is often slow, nonlinear, and exhausting for both the patient and the providers. Story 2. Post-traumatic stress disorder is challenging. I experience hallucinations, flashbacks, and vivid nightmares. Sometimes triggers are unrelated to the trauma. Story 3. Eating disorders are often accompanied by other conditions such as depression, anxiety, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and post-traumatic stress disorder. They have the highest mortality rate and can cause starvation-induced hallucinations, as well as a range of long-term health problems. Story 4. I have borderline personality disorder, and it can be challenging. When I fall in love, I invest deeply. However, when I am hurt, my reaction is intense. I am in treatment and learning how to manage these feelings. It often feels like an all-or-nothing situation, which also applies to other areas of my life. I find myself engaging in self-sacrificing behavior when I am in pain. I have many scars because the pain can be overwhelming and draining. It's not a constant state. Mainly, specific triggers can cause me to spiral. My therapist has advised me to go home and rest when I feel overwhelmed. If I sense that I might react with anger, I just go home. It's like taking a break from the world. Story 5. Borderline personality disorder is said to be the most challenging mental health issue for many reasons. Individuals who have it are often misunderstood. It is frequently misdiagnosed and can be treated incorrectly for nearly a lifetime. Story 6. Eating disorders have the highest rate of death, primarily due to suicide, among all types of mental disorders. Story 7. Panic disorder is a devastating condition that can strike unexpectedly. Employment is lost, friendships may fade, and even simple activities like leaving the house become daunting. Everything you once knew about life is transformed, and this becomes your new reality. The fortunate ones, like me, manage to overcome it over a few years and can gradually rebuild their lives. The unfortunate ones endure ongoing struggles for the remainder of their lives. Story 8. I have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, borderline personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and treatment-resistant depression. Out of all of them, obsessive-compulsive disorder is the most challenging, followed by borderline personality disorder. Story 9. I have bipolar disorder type 1 and borderline personality disorder. In my opinion, borderline personality disorder is definitely worse. If someone asked which one I would want to get rid of first, it would always be borderline. It is so painful. Story 10. Delusional parasitosis comes to mind with this prompt. I have watched a patient visit more than a dozen doctors trying to get confirmation that she is infested with parasites. After numerous stool samples, blood tests, laboratory work, scans, and biopsies, it was clear that she did not have any parasites but remains convinced. Story 11. Any condition that convinces you that you are unlovable or broken can be very challenging. Whether it is depression, borderline personality disorder, obsessive-compulsive disorder, or trauma, the worst part is believing that you are alone in it. Story 12. I would say some of the top contenders are bipolar disorder. One moment you can be the happiest person in the world, and the next you feel worse than ever. These individuals often experience extreme mood swings, which can lead to tragedy, leaving loved ones confused because they did not see the signs. The higher your highs, the lower your lows. Obsessive-compulsive disorder, it is not just a quirk about being hyper-organized or clean. Some people with this disorder may think that if they do not complete certain actions, such as locking the door, counting items, or washing hands until they are raw, a catastrophic event might occur. There is a feeling of constant impending doom and anxiety if these actions are not performed in a specific way, which can severely impact their daily functioning, employment, and relationships. Dementia: imagine knowing someone for years, only for them to forget who you are in an instant. Imagine your elderly mother asking where your deceased father is, thinking he is just at work. When you remind her that he has passed away, she has to go through the stages of grief repeatedly. This condition is not only devastating for the person experiencing it, but also for those around them. Story 13. The one you are battling. Everyone has their own struggles. It is up to the rest of us whether we want to be kind and compassionate or unkind. Story 14. Statistically, if you talk to any mental health professionals, they may identify borderline personality disorder. It involves a lack of self-identity, inability to regulate emotions, constant fear of abandonment, suicidal thoughts, and difficulty maintaining relationships, especially romantic ones. Childhood trauma can last a lifetime. It is important to be kind to your children. Story 15. Comorbidities can be challenging. For example, having bipolar disorder along with obsessive-compulsive disorder and attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, or major depressive disorder with psychotic features, can make it difficult to function. Managing medications and finding doctors or therapists becomes more complicated. Dealing with multiple diagnoses can be overwhelming. Story 16. I might be biased since I experience it, but I would say that severe insomnia can severely impact mental health. It can reach a point where the only thoughts are about self-harm. Story 17. Lewy body dementia presents a range of symptoms, including those associated with Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease, along with distressing hallucinations. Unfortunately, antipsychotic medications cannot be used due to the risk of neuroleptic malignant syndrome. There is no cure, treatment, or possibility of recovery. I understand why Robin Williams chose to end his life rather than confront this disease. Story 18. It must be that scenario where your mind, for no apparent reason, decides that your mother or someone else is not really your mother but instead an imposter who looks and behaves exactly like her in every measurable way. Alternatively, it could be the situation where the same thing occurs, but instead of your mother, it is one of your own limbs. Story 19. One of my biggest struggles is health anxiety. No matter what symptom I have, big or small, I automatically assume I am facing a terminal illness. Story 20. Anything with some type of psychotic component, such as schizoid personality disorder, bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia, can lead to assumptions about your ability to be trusted or listened to. Regardless of how your disorder manifests or the effectiveness of the help you receive, many people will view you through the lens of negative stereotypes presented in the media, such as the archetypes of a crazy ex-girlfriend or a future deranged serial killer. Moreover, living in a state where you are constantly emotionally manipulated or misled by your own mind is extremely distressing and difficult to cope with. Story 21. Borderline personality disorder is challenging, but recovery is possible with significant effort and acceptance. Marsha Linehan expressed it well. Having borderline personality disorder is like having third-degree burns over 90% of your body. The slightest touch, or even the threat of it, can feel unbearable. Story 22. Fans stop spinning when I look at them. This has been happening for over 20 years. Story 23. Bipolar disorder can sometimes make episodes and mood swings difficult to manage, preventing individuals from experiencing full-blown depressive catatonia or hysterical mania. However, it can also wreak havoc in a remarkably short time. Many individuals share their stories of how they have ruined their marriages, lost jobs, spent their life savings, faced homelessness, been placed on psychiatric holds, and even encountered criminal charges. These events can unfold within a day, a week, or a month. It is incredibly challenging to explain the various forms of bipolar disorder and the spectrum of symptoms. Each individual experiences different symptoms and cycles. It is hard to convey how someone can be in an episode, go to work, appear normal, and yet be struggling significantly underneath. There are varying levels of control and awareness, with triggers often stemming from stress or chemical imbalances. Every episode is unique and can pose a serious threat to one's life. Some may experience psychosis, leading to cognitive damage, including potential dementia and traumatic brain injuries. Bipolar disorder can disrupt sleep patterns, appetite, and weight. During moments of awareness in an episode, it can feel like being trapped behind one's eyes while a force takes over, causing harm to oneself and loved ones. When there is no awareness, the experience can feel entirely logical. This condition brings about suspicion, agitation, irritability, anger, sadness, and heartbreak. It erodes trust both in oneself and from others. It is like a cloak descending, and the anticipation of its arrival can be overwhelming, creating fear of the potential outcomes, such as the loss of a partner or the threat of death. Individuals continuously build fragments of stability, only to have them crumble again. A significant challenge of living with bipolar disorder is the lack of around-the-clock psychiatric outpatient clinics designed to support individuals during episodes. One cannot simply arrive at a doctor's office and request medication, suicide watch, or enter a quiet room with support staff. Treatment often falls upon personal relationships or the hospital system, neither of which provide long-term solutions. Many suffer through episodes lasting days, weeks, or even months, and acquiring treatment can be difficult, whether in or out of an episode. While those close to you often sense something is wrong, their perceptions may differ from your own. No one wants to feel controlled by their mental illness and by others. Bipolar disorder is an overwhelming, unstable condition that strips away agency, free will, and autonomy. Often, it may not be severe enough for hospitalization, continuously teetering between destruction and subsiding. Treatment is long, arduous, and ever-changing, and the experience can be truly distressing. There is much more that could be shared about this journey. Story 24. Borderline personality disorder is literally so complex to live with and even harder to explain to someone because nobody really understands how it works, and you are always misunderstood. Story 25. The worst mental health condition is the one that convinces you that you do not deserve help. Once your mind turns against you, even healing feels impossible. Story 26. Borderline personality disorder. I don't know if I will love or hate someone, so I have to avoid being near anyone all the time, including myself. Story 27. Selective mutism is a condition where individuals literally cannot speak or stand up for themselves. Children at school may tease and bully those affected during recess because they know they will not report the behavior. Adults may perceive them as odd or unsettling, leading to frustration. Individuals with selective mutism often wonder how they would function as adults if they do not improve. They envision a future where they struggle to order food, book appointments, make friends, or work, which can feel hopeless. This condition is very isolating and often co-occurs with other disorders. It is rarely mentioned, and many people may never hear about it. The difference between regular social anxiety and selective mutism may seem small, but there is a significant distinction between feeling nervous around people and being so terrified that one cannot speak at all. Additionally, it greatly impacts social development. While some individuals improve over time, they may still feel that they will never be considered normal and constantly worry about how obvious their communication struggles are during conversations. Story 28. Multiple personalities. People often try to make it sound enjoyable by referring to themselves as a multiple or describing their condition as multiplicity. But the experience itself is challenging and complex. Story 29. This is only my opinion, but any condition where you are aware of your disorder and have no way to control or improve it would receive my support. Story 30. I feel that if you are suffering from any mental health condition, it can be incredibly debilitating. For me, I would say I experience borderline personality disorder and obsessive-compulsive disorder, although I do not have schizophrenia. Story 31. I am bipolar and it can be really tough to deal with at times. However, I am absolutely terrified of dementia. Story 32. It depends on how extreme you want to take it. Do you mean a deadly health condition or just something that causes pain and inconvenience? I would say having any sort of mental health disorder that hinders your day-to-day life is significant. Bonus points for trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, which can negatively impact relationships alongside unexpected triggers at any given moment. Story 33. untreated schizophrenia is challenging. I felt confused and scared. A treated, medicated individual with schizophrenia. Story 34. Misophonia is particularly challenging when paired with obsessive-compulsive disorder, anxiety, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and bipolar disorder. I wouldn't wish this on anyone. Story 35. My father has paranoid schizophrenia, as do my grandmother and great-grandfather. He would go from not moving from his chair for 2 or 3 hours to putting spackling paste into all electrical outlets because he thought a government agent was behind them talking to him. A couple of months later, he shot a hole into the wall with his grandfather's rifle because he believed he was being gang-stalked and that people were hiding inside the walls. He claimed an angel came to visit him when he wanted to kill himself, which prevented him from going through with it. Nowadays, his new wife has to deal with him. Despite his mental illness, he finished his doctoral degree, and when he is medicated and under supervision, he can work in his field very well. The last couple of years have been going well. I know he is having a crisis when he calls me at 3 a.m. just rambling, or when he develops nasty skin infections from attempting to remove things that aren't there. He once ripped his nail off because he thought the mole under it was a chip, despite the dermatologist assuring him it wasn't. He, of course, didn't trust the doctor, and it was difficult to get him to take the antibiotics. As a daughter, it is the most painful experience to endure. There is nothing scarier than an actively psychotic person performing at-home surgeries in the bathtub to remove a tracking device from their body. Story 36. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder are significant mental health conditions. When individuals experience a bipolar episode, they can exhibit extreme and unpredictable behavior. I recall a case of a man who missed a flight due to airport staff. He had been under considerable stress, and the flight was crucial for him, which triggered his bipolar episode. In a state of distress, he ran onto the airport runway through an emergency exit, pursued the taxiing plane, and tragically got caught in the jet's engine and died. Footage of this incident is quite disturbing. Story 37. Axis 2 personality issues are painful because you do not receive sympathy from loved ones when you act out without the justification of having a real mental health condition. Unlike bipolar disorder, for example. Story 38. Schizophrenia is not only influenced by the condition itself but also by societal and governmental oppression. Story 39. The factors that prevent you from recognizing or understanding your condition can be significant. If you are aware that you are experiencing depression or anxiety, you can take steps to address it, no matter how difficult that may be. However, if you are fully detached from reality and believe that the entire world is irrational while you are the only rational one, you may never seek or accept help. Story 40. I have worked in mental health for about 13 years, including about 4 years on an inpatient psychiatric unit. Schizophrenia is incredibly challenging for individuals. Delusional disorders also significantly impact a person's reality. Those who do not experience these conditions often struggle to understand the suffering, which can lead to unkind reactions toward affected individuals. Story 41. I have heard that borderline personality disorder is very challenging. In some states, you can qualify for assisted death with a borderline personality disorder diagnosis. Story 42. Treatment-resistant depression brings an unbearable feeling of hopelessness that becomes the default experience of life. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder is also present. Story 43. Many can be debilitating. My son is currently facing depression and schizophrenia. The schizophrenia is telling him not to take medication, so he is refusing all treatment and sinking deeper into both conditions. Story 44. Depression with psychotic episodes. My doctors do not want to call it full-blown schizophrenia, but the voices tell me it is. Story 45. I have a significant fear of schizophrenia. I have a history of Alzheimer's disease in my family, and that is enough. Story 46. Paranoid personality disorder is quite challenging. Being constantly on guard, expecting attacks, and reacting with unjustified hostility can create numerous problems for an individual. I strongly suspect my uncle has this disorder. I am not a qualified professional, but after reading the symptoms and discussing them with my brother, who is a doctor and has met patients with this condition, it seems likely he has it. He is quite difficult to be around, often annoying others with his negativity and prone to bizarre outbursts and conspiracy theories. Story 47. Can you imagine not having any mental health conditions? When you behave poorly, you would have to admit it is due to your behavior. That would be difficult. Story 48. Schizophrenia and severe eating disorders are serious mental health conditions. I have bipolar disorder, and it can be very challenging. Some friends of mine suffer from schizophrenia, which is truly tragic. Story 49. Is this a real question? Do you really want a group of individuals with mental health conditions to share their opinions on which condition is the most severe? Story 50. In this day and age, consciousness and awareness are significant. As a psychology minor who never used my degree, I find it interesting to open any page of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, and read about various issues, which can often be terrifying. Story 51. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a condition I experience, characterized by vivid flashbacks, nightmares, and frequent anxiety attacks. It is a terrible experience, and I do not recommend it. Story 52. I'm a schizophrenic with psychosis. On top of that, I have attention deficit disorder, which doesn't really help. It's good I have some effective medication for both, so I'm okay for now. Story 53. Wait, actually, religious schizophrenia with anxiety can lead to the idea of eternal torment if you don't follow the voice in your head, which often tells you to do bad things that you do not want to do. I have seen ordinary people fall into this. Story 54. Methamphetamine psychosis or any kind of psychotic disorder exacerbated by methamphetamine is a serious issue. I have worked with many individuals who have substance use disorders. This included conducting interviews with them at regular intervals. Almost every single person we spoke to had a history of childhood sexual abuse that initiated a tragic string of subsequent events. These were not individuals down on their luck. They were the adult versions of deeply abused children. One woman in particular has been known to me for many years. Although she was not a meth user, our local heroin and opioid supply has increasingly been contaminated with meth, leading her to inadvertently become a user of both fentanyl and meth. The meth has completely changed her brain. She now functions on the edge of perpetual terror, feeling as though she has bugs in her blood and muscle tissue. She accused me of being an accomplice to her father, who abused her, despite my being about 25 years younger than her. She claimed that there was a man in the room with us who intended to cast a spell to poison our bodies so we would both give birth to the devil. She cannot sit still or sleep and has wounds from xylazine that she protects from medical care. 3 years ago, we shared a conversation over coffee, and she mentioned some new graffiti near a bridge that she thought was actually pretty good. I checked it out and found that she was right. It did look nice. Now, I cannot imagine ever being able to have a conversation like that with her, which is incredibly sad. Interestingly, the higher levels of meth in her drugs are also reducing her risk of dying from an overdose because there is less fentanyl, and she is actually using less, as she is not coordinated enough to routinely source drugs. However, her life resembles a living hell. Story 55. My dad worked as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, and I asked him what condition was the hardest to work with. He said schizophrenia was the most challenging to help. They faced the most obstacles. Story 56. As a moderately schizophrenic person with dementia, I am high-functioning despite my struggles within my family. The most terrifying thing for me is knowing that I have forgotten just enough information that I should know, but I cannot recall it. I recognize certain people, but I do not know who they are, where I know them from, or why they are significant to me. I find it difficult to cope with this, along with hallucinations and delusions. Story 57. My boyfriend has schizophrenia and dissociative identity disorder, which is a challenging combination. He experiences significant memory gaps and struggles with losing his sense of reality. He forgets who he is and who I am, and he also has auditory and visual hallucinations. In addition, he appears to have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. He is originally from Russia and was adopted by a mentally abusive Dutch family. Fortunately, I am well equipped to support him with his symptoms because I have a similar condition, and my mother is also schizophrenic. Story 58. I work on an adult inpatient psychiatric unit, And I would say that the individuals who come in and are the most acutely ill typically have schizoaffective disorder. Story 59. Everyone affected is struggling in different ways and should be listened to and cared for. Saying that others have it worse often discourages individuals from seeking the treatment they need. Story 60. I believe discussing illnesses in this manner is unhelpful. All illnesses are challenging and cause suffering, which is subjective. Claiming that one is worse than another may lead some individuals to feel that their suffering is invalid and that they should be coping better. This perspective also reinforces stigmas and stereotypes. Story 61. Torn between an eating disorder and borderline personality disorder. Borderline personality disorder can be unbearable and unpredictable, making life difficult. The eating disorder convinces me that I do not deserve to be seen. It creates a giant irrational fear of being perceived and taking up space, leading to paralyzing anxiety, disturbing intrusive thoughts, and suicidal ideation. Story 62. My mother's best friend had two sons. The older one was very intelligent, pursuing his PhD in physics at McGill University in the 1980s. He was a bright child and a successful adult until his early 30s. Then one day, things began to change. He started experiencing hallucinations and became increasingly paranoid. His behavior became erratic and he struggled with insomnia. Eventually, he had a breakdown and was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. It was discovered that he exhibited symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. He moved back in with his mother and became fully medicated. I recall her saying he worked as a grocery bagger when that job was more common. Now nearing 60, he has become more independent, as his mother no longer lives with him. Another friend recently passed away. He was about 55 and had been living in a halfway house. Prior to that, he lived with his 80-year-old mother. In another case, he was in his 30s and owned a business. He drove flashy cars and owned a house. One day, he began claiming that God was communicating with him. He started patting his head, saying he couldn't stop because it helped him think. He insisted that God was telling him things about me and that I was a very nice person, though these were quite juvenile comments. He wasn't working but had a substantial amount of money. He ended up in a psychiatric hospital where they prescribed antipsychotics for his schizophrenia, and he would feel stable for about a week. Then he would smoke marijuana or use cocaine and feel alive again, going on benders that led him back to the hospital. His mother, being elderly, could not cope with the stress or worry. She requested assistance for him, and he was placed in a halfway house with other former inmates. Sadly, he ultimately overdosed. Story 63. In my personal opinion, I feel like I walk around wearing ill-fitting human skin, and the monster inside me peeks out in odd places. Story 64. I have been struggling with obsessive-compulsive disorder for 16 years. It has not stopped throwing intrusive thoughts at me for a single waking moment since I was 6 years old. Story 65. Anorexia induced by extreme anxiety can make your body feel as if your organs are liquefying inside you. All your joints hurt and you feel restless, leading to a reduced appetite. This condition can be deadly with a fatality rate of 30%. Currently, I weigh 90 pounds and I am 6 feet 2 inches tall at 23 years old, simply because I am never hungry. Story 66. I have obsessive-compulsive disorder and honestly wouldn't wish it on anyone. However, I don't believe that one mental illness can be worse than another. Everyone is suffering. Story 67. Out of all of them, I think depression is probably the worst. It's because you know something is wrong, but you just can't do anything about it without someone else to help you get started. Story 68. Borderline personality disorder and dependent personality disorder both seem like they would be challenging to live with. It may just be my social personality disorder influencing my thoughts, as I really don't like the idea of being reliant on others in any way. Story 69. My vote is for having more than one mental illness, where the treatment for one might be contrary to the treatment for another. Managing your care becomes a battle, pitting one treatment against another and requiring you to choose what to manage and what to allow. Bipolar disorder with attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder and anxiety. Your brain needs more serotonin and dopamine for depression, but less dopamine for mania and more for attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder. You can take Prozac for depression, but too much of it may send you into mania. You can take Seroquel for mania, but not too much, or you'll sleep all day and become depressed. You can take Vyvanse for attention deficit/hyperactivity disorder, but be careful, as it could trigger your anxiety. Here's an anxiety medication, but be cautious. You're forced into a state of hypervigilance. If one illness improves, you must keep an eye on which other one may emerge. You constantly have to decide between the lesser of two evils and hope that your mind, which is unwell, is making the right choices. As a patient, it's exhausting, and it's easy to blame yourself when things go wrong. Story 70. Anhedonia. Depression's significant counterpart. I experienced a year-long bout of it after a traumatic brain injury, so I consider myself incredibly lucky compared to those who suffer from this condition permanently. It's an absolutely terrifying disorder. I tried every medication available, every experimental treatment, and the only thing that made a difference and gave me a sense of hope was ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. I also suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and panic disorder, so I am no stranger to mental health issues, but anhedonia was a completely different monster I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. In reality, the worst mental health disorder is the one you are battling. It's all subjective, and everyone deserves kindness. Story 71. I feel fortunate to manage my bipolar disorder effectively with medication, as I used to struggle significantly. However, it is distressing to witness someone with severe bipolar disorder negatively impact their family through debt, engage in Munchausen syndrome at the expense of their child, and lead their spouse to take their own life due to grief. This situation is truly tragic. Story 72. I have worked in mental health for years. The most tortured individuals I encountered were those with paranoid schizophrenia. One man nearly castrated himself, and many who would frequently stop and restart their medications committed horrific acts. It is very sad to witness or hear about. Mental health issues are truly heartbreaking. No one wants to exist in a space within their own body where they feel like a stranger or experience distress, confusion, or sadness. It is not a joke. People who laugh at or believe that others are fabricating, exaggerating, being dramatic, or seeking attention are among the most disturbed. Even depression can leave someone feeling hopeless and helpless. As humans, we need to have empathy for others. Story 73. I have 3 mental health conditions, possibly 4. The one I find the hardest to deal with is obsessive-compulsive disorder. It is often stigmatized and not taken seriously compared to other mental health conditions. It feels like a type of mental turmoil that never ends. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.